Go. Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome, webcast viewers, Channel 9 folks, and all you guys here. Thanks for giving me the next hour of your time. My name is Sam Jarawan. I'm on the Windows UI Framework team, or the XAML team. As you probably guessed, I'm going to be talking about upgrading your existing apps. How many folks here have existing apps they plan to upgrade to UWP? Okay, that makes sense. Almost all of you guys in the audience. Awesome. So that's my day job, and by night I write apps as well. I've got apps in the phone store, the Windows store, did one on Android once. So a lot of the content I'm going to cover today is actually relevant for myself. I still have some apps I need to port over the next few months as well. As you've probably been seeing this slide a lot, please submit an evaluation after. It's really helpful to us speakers, and you can use the Build app for that. So this morning, I'm going to be covering, why should you move to Universal Windows Platform? That's probably obvious by now, but just in case, I'll give you a rehash of that. I then want to equip you with being able to come up with a deployment strategy, a porting strategy for your apps. There's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all in this case. And then I'm going to give you a porting demo. I'm going to use one of my real-world apps. It's a newsreader app I have in the Windows Store and Windows Phone Store. Then I'm going to cover a bunch of upgrade-breaking changes. Once you upgrade your app, there are enough differences between 8.1 and 10.0 that you need to take care of. And then lastly, I'll be discussing Silverlight apps. I won't be going too heavy into this. I'll be talking about some tools coming that'll help you. But part of the strategy I want to teach you should help you with your Silverlight apps as well. All right, so why move to UWP apps? OK, so I just changed the slide yesterday after watching the keynote. I think there's one big reason: 1 billion devices. 1 billion devices. Even if we don't hit that, if we hit half of that in the next few years, 500 million devices. That's a lot. But in case that's not incentive enough, of course, there's the new features you've been hearing about throughout this week. I list a couple here: inking, Cortana, AllJoin. And innovation is always going to happen first with this platform. Another reason is performance improvements. If you have an existing app, we've done a lot of work to increase performance of XAML apps. I don't know if you've noticed or heard much about it yet, but almost all of our first-party apps are now XAML. The Start menu, Cortana, Settings, Office. These guys are all relying on the XAML framework. So our team has done a lot of work on performance. There was a great talk yesterday by Mark Alcazar and Kiran Kumar. If you missed it, highly recommend checking it out. But there is a bunch of performance that you'll get for free: startup time, reduced memory, and then there's additional opt-in performance items you can do as well. And then lastly, just getting down to a single code base. Last year we introduced XAML 8.1 universal apps. You could share a lot of code, but you were still building two different AppX files. You had to submit to two different stores. So we're moving away from that. All right. So again, this talk is mostly relevant if you're porting from a Windows Store 8 or 8.1 app, a Windows Phone 8.1 XAML app, or a universal Windows 8.1 app. Also, the Silverlight, Windows Phone Silverlight apps, not the desktop Silverlight plugin. So I won't be covering moving a Win32 app or WPF app, but maybe you'll get some strategies from this talk as well if that's what you need to do. All right, so let's jump right into upgrading an app. If you've downloaded the tools that were released yesterday and tried this, you might have noticed we don't have an upgrade script yet available in the tools. Part of what we want to do here is get feedback and make sure we're building the right upgrade scripts. And I'm going to teach you how to do it essentially manually. Now, one of the problems I've always had with our upgrade scripts is it does inline upgrades. And generally, I still need to maintain my old versions of my apps. They're not going away for some time. So generally, I've had to go create a copy of my code, run the upgrade script, and then go merge it back into my solution so I could manage it all there. And I think what I'll show you is it might be easier just to add a UWP project to your existing solution. So the general process I'm going to go through here is creating a new UWP project in your existing solution, then copying code, and it's going to be as simple as drag and drop. It's a lot faster than creating a new one in a different solution where you have to import all your files. Just drag and drop, and I'll be showing you that. Once you do that, then there'll be some references you'll need to add. And finally, some manifest changes. If you're using background tasks, for example, you'll need to go repopulate the manifest. And there's changes in the manifest file. I'm going to drill into that a little bit later in the deck. And then essentially, you're at a point where you need to build, fix, build. You're going to probably have some build breaks. And I'm going to show you why in a slide or two. And then once you have your code building, it's probably not going to be ready yet. There are some other things you're going to want to take care of. If you're porting over from a phone app, you're going to want to support larger screens. You're going to want to make your app adaptable, responsive. And there was a great talk yesterday by Tim Hewer and Harini Kannan. So if you can check that one out, I highly recommend it. So let's go now into developing that porting strategy. Again, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all here. I'm going to show a few options, and I'm going to pick one and walk through that one. If you're going from a single Windows or a phone project, that's the easiest scenario. Of course, just create another single UWP to target all those Windows 10 devices. Then you can use adaptive code. You might have heard this in some other talks. If you're using a device family-specific API, for example, on mobile, on phones, there's a camera button, and there's an API for that. Well, that API doesn't exist in the Universal Windows Platform API set. What you need to do in that case is add the Windows.mobile extension SDK. And again, I'm going to show you how to do that. And you write what we call an API contract. And essentially, at runtime, it says, hey, does this API exist? If so, then do it. Otherwise, if you didn't have that wraparound, it would throw an exception if you ran that app on a device that didn't have that API. And again, you'd want to build your app and make it your UI responsive, adaptive, and maybe even tailored. And I'm going to show you how to do some of that tailoring as well. And optionally, you might want to then create shared projects or PCLs. So I give an example here. On the left side, you can see just a standard Windows 8.1 project. There's no extra DLLs. I just simplified it here. And then on the right, you see two projects in the same solution. This one's really easy. In this case, I added a portable class library, or it could have been a shared folder. The shared folders now are very generic. You can share them amongst any project types at all. Now, if you are upgrading from a Windows 8 Universal solution, it's a little more complicated, and there's more options available for you. We call these dual-headed solutions. What that means is there's a phone head or a phone app that gets generated, and there's also a Windows 8.1 app that gets generated. This generates two separate apps, and then you can put all your shared code in the shared. So you could have a lot of code in your shared or little. We've seen some apps, too, that vary and essentially are writing two different apps, one for the desktop and one for phone. And I'm going to show you how you can handle situations like that as well. So the options that I'm going to list here are creating a single UWP to target all devices. So you start out with those two heads, and you're merging it back into one. That's one option. Or you could have a similar scenario where you want to have a different, essentially different app, but sharing a lot of code as well for mobile or Xbox. You might want to target a specific app for one of those devices. This is how you do that. There's a manifest entry under dependencies. Now, when you deploy a default app, and I'll show you this, you'll see the target device family set to Windows.Universal. Essentially, that's telling the store and the installer, hey, I rely on the Windows Universal API set, and this is the version number I need. If you were to throw this in there, this now says I also need Windows.Mobile API set. And the store is smart enough to only offer this app to Windows mobile devices. When you do a pattern, let me go back for a sec. When you do end up doing this, you want to make sure you offer, if you want to be on those billion devices, you want to make sure you have one that is universal, and then perhaps you target one other device. Your Xbox app, for example, might be different enough and contain enough different assets, or your mobile version might be different enough. But one thing to take note of is mobile doesn't mean phone. At some point in the future, we could release an 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch tablets running the mobile OS. So don't make assumptions that mobile means phone. All right. So code sharing. There's a lot of options for code sharing as well. You could have a single shared project that is sharing code between all of your projects, your 8.1 and your UWP. You could have one shared project that you keep for just your Windows 8.1 apps, and then another one for your 10.0 apps if you ended up doing dual apps for UWP apps. You could have one shared between your phone and your 10.0 mobile, one shared between your 8.1 desktop and your universal 10.0 one as well. And there's just a lot of options here. I'm going to show you that in code. I don't want you to feel like you're locked into any one option there. So I'm going to show 4 strategies, and then I'm going to pick one and walk through that with my code. Option 1 here is where you add a single universal Windows project and advance. Oh, there we go. All right, and you're basically, as I mentioned earlier, you merge all your code into a single solution. You might have done a dual-headed app, but you didn't want to originally. That was the only way you could do it, and now you can merge it all back into one. Right, one scalable, responsive, adaptable UI for it all. Great. Everything's self-contained. You might not want to manage any shared code if it's going to be a single head. And here's an example of what that could look like. On the left, you see a standard universal Windows 8.1 universal solution. I threw a portable class library in there as well. And then on the right, you just see at the same level as that My App folder, same level, you just see your universal app sitting in there as well. So you just take all your code and copy it in there. So that's one option. Another option is essentially when you want to create multiple targeting apps. And again, one for mobile. It might be Xbox. And it's self-contained in this case. It's sharing its own code. And this is what it looks like. It's essentially a mirror of the 8.1 project structure. Give you a second to look at that. OK, so, and then it has its own shared. Now, the option 3 now is the one I like the best that I've been using on my own apps. And basically adding just a new head. Instead of a new project structure, just add a new head to my existing project folder. And then share the same code as my 8.1. And then I could actually use #if statements inside of my shared code if I want to target anything. And I'm going to show you an example of this. I'm going to choose this option, option 3, in the coding I show you. But notice on the right-hand side, in bold, is that new head, the myapp.uwp. That's the new head. I like this option. And then to take that one step further, if you did want multiple heads for your Windows 10 apps, it might look like this. There we go. So there's 2 heads, one for the generic universal, one specifically for mobile. One thing we're looking at adding in tooling we want to get some feedback on is with Windows 8.1, you could have right-clicked on one of those 8.1 projects and had it add the extra head. If you had a phone project, you could have right-clicked and said, hey, add a Windows 8.1 head to it, and it would have created the shared node for you. So we're looking at, hey, maybe we can just add that to one of these. You right-click on the Windows Phone version, and we set up the UWP mobile version for you. And perhaps we can add the extension SDKs for you if you need them. All right, so before I jump into coding, there's 3 main areas you're going to need to address when porting your app. The first one is build breaks. You're going to see build breaks for 2 specific reasons. One is APIs that have moved. I've already mentioned there's some APIs that belong to the mobile only. So when you first migrate your app, if your app is targeting the UWP APIs and you're using a mobile API, it won't get a build break until you add the reference. All of our different platform families will have, or device families, will have their own extension SDK, Xbox, IoT, Surface Hub, mobile, desktop. And then the next thing you'll run into are deprecated APIs. So you probably know by now that the charms bar is now gone in Windows 10 apps. If you write a Windows 8.1 app, charms bar is still there. We've added an affordance to the top left of the app Chrome. It looks like a little menu button. Bring that down, then you can get to your settings. But in Windows 10 apps, you don't get that. And I'm going to show you how to account for that. You essentially need to add an affordance inside of your app to launch your settings. The next thing you're going to need to address are runtime breaks. There's one main reason you'll see some runtime breaks. As we converged our styles, so we started out with a bunch of controls for phone and a bunch of controls on the desktop, and we needed to converge those. There were some controls that existed in one spot and some in another. Some got deprecated. As we moved them together, there were styles that were no longer needed. We didn't want to include them in the generic .xaml So if you're using some of them, phone accent brush is an example, and I'll show you a couple more that I'll run into in my example. There'll be a couple options you'll need to do. One, and also if you've restyled any control templates, you'll probably want to restyle them again to pick up any of the design refresh we've done and change any of these, because there's going to be a new type ramp for some of these. We have on the Dev Center design guidelines, and it'll have the type ramp of replacement styles to use in case you run into this. The last thing you need to address are user experience breaks. In Windows 10, UWP apps, some of our XAML controls have been refreshed. Actually, most of them have. And some with minor style changes and some with major style changes. And if you had a pixel-perfect app before, things could look a little off. Things could be off by pixels. So you'll want to walk through your app and look for items like that. And the last one here is there's some breaking change on some of our controls. I'll go through a list after my demo, but one of them is grid view, for example, now flows vertically instead of horizontally. And so if you were depending on a certain ordering of your grid view items, it now would look different, and that could essentially break your app. All right, so let's jump over now to the demo. Wake up my box. So what I'm going to show here is a real-world app I have. It's a universal app. I've got a Windows 8.1 head here, a Windows Phone head, and some shared code here. In my shared code, I have all my assets. I have all my business logic. I have my resource strings all shared, my view models. I don't have much in the view directory. I have one standard styles file, but I don't have any of my views. And then I even have shared the app.xaml and app.xaml.cs shared. If I go into my heads, I can see in my desktop head, all I have in here are views. I have a few views in here, in fact, 2, and I've got controls. And then inside of my phone head, I just have views. Let me give you a real quick demo of what the app is. It's a newsreader app. It used to be a Google newsreader app until Google retired their service. It now uses another service called NewsBlur. And so this is a 3-column design here. And if I switch over to the phone version, basically that 3-column design is, I had the app launched, there it is a single page for each of those columns. So in Gadget, I can click into a feed, click deeper. Okay. So I'm going to, first of all, create that UWP project. So step 1, file new, project. So I want C#, Windows, Windows Universal, blank app. And I'll just give this a name, feed reader.uwp, just to be consistent with the naming of the other ones, .windows, .windows phone. All right, so while that's building, the first step I'm going to do is make it a little more blank than the blank app starts out with. I'm going to get rid of the main page that is created. I'm going to get rid of the app.xaml and app.xaml.cs because I have a shared version. A lot of people might have different app.xamls in each of their heads, and I'm going to need to use pound defines inside of my main one. I want to show you how to do that. But if you were to have one inside of each head, you wouldn't have to worry about that. So I'm going to remove the app.xaml now and the main page, and also all the assets. I have shared assets. OK, so that's all gone. So the first thing I want to do is get access to that shared directory, the shared project. So I'll just go File, Add, New Item. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong thing. I want to go into my References and add references. Now, there's a tab over here for shared projects. It'll show me all shared projects I have. I'll click on this guy. And there we go. I've pulled in my shared projects. And the second step in the process, I said, was adding any references. I know that my app uses JSON.NET. So if I tried to build right now, it would build. So I want to save that step. So I'm going to add that DLL as well. I could use NuGet, but I have it here. I've used it recently, so it's going to show up in my recently used list. OK, I'm done with my references. That's all my app uses. You guys probably will have a lot more. The last thing I need to do, and maybe I'll tell you a bit of my strategy here, is I'm going to start with the desktop app. I'm going to get that lit up, get it working, and then I'm going to bring in the mobile views. And then I'm going to show you how to load the mobile views or load the desktop views, depending on the device I'm on. So all I'm going to do is grab my view folder and control folder and just drag and drop it. Now, essentially, what I've done is what the inline scripts would have done for me. It also would have adjusted the manifest file, updated that, and there's actually some tools available right now to go do that that were made, but I want to show you how to do it manually. All right, so I'm going to close that head. So I'm just going to build this down. Let's see if it runs. And it ran because I didn't select a different project. It was still pointing to my 8.1, so let me change the startup project to the new one. And I'm going to get a build break. I'll spoil that for you right now. OK, remember I talked about the removal of the charms bar? Well, it's complaining about those APIs. So let's go see what's going on here. So this is my event handler when the settings charms bar gets invoked, or the charms bar gets invoked, to populate the charms bar. So I can see here I'm adding a settings command. I'm adding a few others here. I think one is for accounts. I have a what's new page. And when the user hits the settings button in the charms bar, this method is going to get called. For now, I'm just going to comment this code out. I just want to get up and building. And I should mention, the goal that I'm going for right now, and in this demo, is just to get my code back to a building state, to a state where I can then take it forward, maybe use new features, and adjust the UX. I won't go into that part of it, but I do want to show you this part to help with the strategy of upgrading. OK, so I've commented out that one method, and oh, it's still complaining about something. Oh, this is in my, I have a start method. When the page first comes up, this is what registers, this is the call that registers it with the charms bar. I'm going to comment that out now. And let's see if things build OK. All right, it's complaining about one other thing, and that's because this should be commented out right now. I'll come back to that. All right, so it's building. It looks like it's building clean. There we go. App is running. So the desktop app wasn't too hard to get up and going. I'll click on a feed, make sure everything looks good still. OK, I noticed there's some weird things happening when I resize it. I didn't really design this app to be resizable when I did it for Windows 8. That's something I'd want to take care of. I have an app bar down here. So the next thing I want to do is show you how do I bring settings back into my app. What I'm going to do is add a settings button right down there. So I'm going to open up my XAML page and find that app bar, which is right here. And I'm just going to copy the last button in there and paste a new one. This is enabled as false. I want to turn that. I want to get rid of that because I want my settings button to be enabled. And I'll retitle this control settings tile button. And I want a new click handler. Let IntelliSense help me, and autocomplete. There we go. Create a new event. And then lastly, this is the resource. Windows 8 did happen to have a app bar style. So if I just hit settings, app bar style, I'll get it. The last thing I have to do is go hook up this event handler to actually call my show settings. So let's go back over here, and I'll find my show settings. There's the code I need, my function call for show settings. So if I zip down now to the very bottom, that's where new events get added. There it is. Paste that there, run the app, and then I should be able to launch my settings. So real simple. You need to just add, like I said, add that affordance in there. Settings, there we go. All my settings are available. OK, great. So if you were upgrading just a Windows 8.1 app, I'd be done. I could now start focusing on some of the adaptability and the responsiveness of the app. It's that simple. What I'm going to do now, though, is bring in all of my mobile views. So let me open up the Windows Phone 8.1 project and look under my views. Now, this might not pop out right away, but notice I have main page here. That's always the default XAML name of the page. And I have main page here. That's going to conflict. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder here. I'm going to keep all my mobile stuff together. And then I'm going to drag all of those views into that mobile folder. And because I still have a conflicting name, I'm going to change the name of this one just to main page mobile. So here's the class. Now, when I do this, a little light bulb pops up, and it can help. Visual Studio will help me rename it everywhere. The problem is I have another main page, and I don't want it to change it everywhere. So when you rename a class, you've got to do it in 3 spots. One is the class name itself, one is the constructor, and the last one is the XAML page itself. If you had different names in your different heads, I wouldn't have had to deal with this at all. So here's the last spot. OK. So again, I've copied all my views over. Now let's launch this and just see if it works. But first, I need to tell the app to load that view. So back to my app.xaml.cs. If I scroll down a little bit on the onLaunched, you can see where the first page gets called. So rootframe.navigate right here. It's looking for main page. If I change this to main page mobile, OK, notice IntelliSense isn't picking it up right now. If you're familiar with using these shared projects, it'll show you the APIs within the context of the head that you're in. There's a drop-down up here. Right now, it's set to Windows Phone. If I select Windows Universal Windows, my universal one, then this will resolve properly. But either way, if I didn't pick that, it still would have built and ran. So let's try building and running this one and see what happens. I mentioned you can get build breaks. I didn't get any build breaks. I wasn't using any mobile-only APIs. So I can see the app is actually my mobile view. I know that just because of the app bar at the bottom is different. Let's see how networking is doing in here. It doesn't seem to be popping any data at the moment. OK, I might be having networking issues, but I can see my other pages up. Let me just relaunch that, see if that helps. OK, I do seem to have some data. So, OK, that's a little odd. But that was my mobile view. OK, great. So I've got a mobile view now, and I've got a desktop or universal view. So now I want to do a few more things. First of all, I'm going to want to handle the hardware, the back button. I wasn't able to go into the app and show you, but oh, sorry, I just realized too, when I navigated to my second page, it would have thrown an exception. Let me see if I can launch that one more time, because I do want to show you that exception. Do you remember I talked about 3 things that your app's going to need to take care of? OK, let me make sure this is coming through. So I talked about those missing styles. My second page, and I can load it up, has some of those missing styles. And IntelliSense will tell me about them right here. So when I navigated to the second page, it would have thrown a XAML parser exception. And it's missing these styles. These are some of those styles I mentioned that did not converge. I have a spreadsheet here showing all the styles that didn't converge. There's, I think, about 150 of them. Most of them have to do with controls, as we converged controls from phone to desktop. But a few of them were some text ones that were only used on phone. And so the ones I'm getting an error for are these ones here. We're going to have this documented in our Dev Center. We're also going to provide a file for you. If you want to just get your app up and running, not have to deal with this, you can drop this file in. Now, the one problem is because these are the old values and everything else has been visually refreshed, these will have the old values in it. So these font numbers won't match up with the rest of the system. But I want to show you how to add them in. So I'm just going to cut these out of here. And again, we'll provide these. You can also look up the generic.xaml file built into the SDK and get them out of there if you want. And then in my app.xaml, to add styles, I'm just going to go to my default theme dictionary I have here, and I can just add them right here. Real simple to add styles. Or I could go and, where I was actually having the problem in this page here, I could have just changed, see now there's no squiggly underneath it, it's finding it. I could have changed these to something else. We're also in the Dev Center going to have the type ramp to show you what the replacements are and better styles to use for some of these. And then again, if we had provided, we're going to have a file, and if I provided you a file, I would just have to drop that file in my solution and reference it similar to the way the standard style is being referenced here. That's how you can import more styles into your app. So I've added those. I'll give this one more shot, see if this runs. Yeah, very strange. I'm not getting any data there. The next thing I want to do is if I was able to go into the app, the back button would not do anything. The hardware back button would not do anything. The API is only part of the mobile SDK. Let me show you how that was handled in my 8.1 Universal app. If I bring up the app.xaml.cs and go to the top here, there is an if, a pound if. Some of you may be using this pattern as well. And it says, hey, if I'm compiling the Windows Phone app, this is the 8.1 version, then subscribe to the hardware back button. Of course, I'm doing my UWP app, so this line of code never got hit. So I'm not subscribing to the back button. So let's say I did want to subscribe to the back button. Well, I'll just comment out this code here. And this is what the API contract looks like. I talked about that briefly. This is type present. You're basically saying, hey, is this type present on my system? If so, hook up the back button. And notice it's still, IntelliSense isn't showing up. What you then need to do is add that extension SDK. So you go to References, Add Reference, and under Windows Universal is a new Extensions tab. And you can pick the mobile extension SDK. There's the desktop extension SDK. IoT down here, we'll have an Xbox one, and here when the Xbox SDK gets released. And then I'll hit OK here. And then the last thing I need to do, if I hover over here, or hit Control dot, this will add the using statement for me at the top. Now, because I only want this to be used within my UWP app, what I'll want to do is wrap that in an if up here. So if Windows underscore UAP. Notice that's not UWP. Well, internally, we've been using UAP for quite some time. And we recently changed it to UWP. So I'm not sure if it's too late for us to change it in the tooling. There's also one other spot in the manifest where you'll see UAP. You may have even heard some speakers here slip and use the term UAP. But, so hopefully we'll have these APIs changed at some point before we RTM. All right, so that's all you need to do. Now, I don't actually want to do this in my app because we do have a converged back button. There is a back button. It's not available yet in the current build of Windows. You can have a back button in your Chrome. So you can turn on a back button in the top left of your Chrome so that users can navigate back. And then because you have a back button in your Chrome, and when you're in tablet mode, you also get a back button on the bottom. And then if you have a back button on phone, we have one universal back button API. So let me show you how to do that. So what I'm actually going to do is comment this back out. And again, I wanted to leave that in there just to show you how to use the mobile extension SDK. I needed some good example. I didn't want to, because I was using real code, I didn't want to kind of fake anything into my code. But let me scroll down a little bit here and show you how to use the new API. I can't have it in my constructor because it uses the instance of the current view. So it would look like this. Comment this out. The app requested. Sorry, the back requested API. And then I'll create a new event handler for that. That gets created at the bottom, right here. I'm going to move that. Doesn't want to cut. Oh, there we go. Move that up here with my other back handling work. And there we go. And I could wrap that again in the Windows UAP if statement. Again, if I was using an app.xaml inside of my single head, I wouldn't have run into that problem at all. The last thing I want to show you here is, how do I had this hard-coded to load my mobile view on desktop, but I don't want my mobile view on desktop. So how do I handle that situation? What I'm going to show you is not ideal, and I actually don't recommend it, but I want to show you how to do something. I mentioned this earlier. You don't want to assume that mobile is going to be a phone-sized device. You really want to build adaptable apps that adjust to the screen or window width, or maybe the screen width. We have some APIs coming. Harini's talk mentioned them briefly yesterday. They're not fully available yet. There's some Win32 APIs, or DX APIs, I believe, that you can call through your app right now if you need to get unblocked by this to get the screen size. But we're looking at adding some WinRT APIs to get the actual device size. And then essentially you can say, hey, if my device is 7 inches and lower, load this view, or higher, load another view. Again, but what I'm going to show you, the reason I'm showing you as well is if you wanted to have a view specifically for Xbox or the Surface Hub, this is the process you'll do. So I have a little snippet in here, and I'll uncomment that. And I'm going to move this one back to, I changed that to mobile. So essentially what I'm saying here is if I'm a Windows UAP or Windows UWP, then use this analytics info device family, windows.mobile. Okay, again, that could be windows.xbox for the device family of Xbox. If I'm running the windows.mobile, then load my main page mobile. Otherwise, load the other main page. Now, the one thing to be really careful about here is don't do something like, if I'm on mobile, load this. If I'm on desktop, load this, and be done. Because this app, it's universal. It could be run on any machine. And if you did that, you're suddenly, and you're deployed on a HoloLens or the Surface Hub, you basically said, don't load any view. Your app's just going to be black. And that's not very good. You'll lose a few customers, probably. And again, I need to use IntelliSense here to bring up my using, and that should have added my profile right here. OK. So let's see if that works. So I'm running it now on my local machine, and I should get my desktop view. OK, great. I get my desktop view, and apparently, again, I'm not getting data, but you can see I've got the multi-columns. And if I run it now on my phone emulator, which I have right here, and then I should get my mobile view here. OK. And surprisingly, my emulator is getting network access, but my desktop is not. So, OK. So that's it for the demo. I'm going to switch back to my slide deck. OK. So I hope that got rid of some of the magic that you might have thought goes on with some of the upgrade scripts. There's nothing major going on. And a lot of this is toolable. That's why I want to get feedback from you guys. And be able to build the right tools that you guys need. And again, this was just to get your code up and running. The next step, of course, would be to, OK. Oh, actually, I'm going to cover breaking changes first here. So there's breaking changes with XAML. There's changes in the manifest file and scale factors that I'm going to cover. These are some of the major areas I thought would be really important to show you. First, XAML. There's been a good amount of control changes as we've migrated or converged our controls. And one thing that's also different I want to mention is the default theme. When you run your app on desktop, if you didn't specify a theme, it's now light. In 8.1, if you run an 8.1 app, it's dark. So that's a little bit different. But if you want to get that same behavior as you had with your 8.1 app, you just set requested theme to dark. The interesting thing is our phone, the default theme is dark. And what we now do, though, is in the blank template, we actually set the default theme to light. We don't want you to have to, you're starting a new project, deal with both themes right away. So deal with one, and then you can set whatever theme you want for your app, or leave it blank and let the system pick the theme for you. App bar and command bar, as they have converged, the behavior is slightly different. One of them I wanted to call out is when you set is sticky to true, it makes it not light dismissible as it was before. The search box is not converged, but we've added APIs to the auto suggest box, so we recommend you use that. So if you were using that before, use the auto suggest box. Date time picker. This one's not necessarily a big breaking change, more visual. But on Windows Phone, when you launch the date or time picker, it brought up another screen where you can pick the date or time. On desktop, it just brought up a 3-column choosers, boxes that you could pick those date and times. We've converged that, so it's more like desktop, but then it also has a new style refresh on it as well. So your 8.1, your phone version will look a little bit different. Pivot control is now converged. This isn't a breaking change, but if you were using it on phone before in your Universal app and you were hoping to use it on desktop but it wasn't there and you had to use something else, maybe Hub or something else, it's now available and converged. Joe Stegman had a great talk talking about all the overview of what's new in XAML. I highly recommend checking that one out. And grid view, list view, I mentioned the top one already. The flow is different. But also there's some new visuals. The selection model has changed a bit. You used to get a check mark on the right side of the list items. Now there's a check box on the left side. The swipe gesture is now deprecated as well. Semantic zoom is now converged, and you zoom out by tapping on the group header. Pinch zoom is not enabled by default, but it can be re-enabled. Mobile no longer zooms out to the entire screen. It's constrained by the bounds of the control. So similar to the way the date time picker would go to full screen to pick it, the semantic zoom no longer does that. Content dialog is now converged. It's a lot more flexible to use. Again, not a breaking change, but if you used it before, it's a lot more flexible than message dialog because you can populate any XAML, not just an OK and cancel button. And then I already mentioned the unconverged styles, so that's part of the XAML breaking changes list as well. We're going to have this all documented on the Dev Center. Now I'm going to move into the manifest differences. The first thing to note is that UAP namespace. Can't see it very well, maybe it's in the purple, but not a huge difference. And when you do the new app, the manifest will already have these. But if you did want to migrate your old manifest for some reason, then you'd want to change the M2 to UAP. Also, some capabilities, this list here requires a prefix of UAP colon. And again, don't worry about copying these down. We're going to have the deck available. The targeting format is different now. Previously, you'd see the OS min version, max version. Now you see the device target device family. And this is that area where I showed earlier you could also add Windows.mobile or Windows.xbox, and that will make this version of your app only applicable to those devices. Okay, next, visual elements. There's a bunch of differences in here. First one is the namespace changes. The next one, the default, some of the default tile sizes have changed as we've converged between phone and desktop. So the 30 by 30 logo, you now need a 44 by 44 logo. The 70 by 70, you now need a 71 by 71. And lastly on the visual elements, there's some deprecated elements. So if you're using these, there's other ways to get at them. We'll have that documented. The one I want to call out, though, is the bottom one, the min width. That's the min width of your window. I believe the default is 500 pixels. So you used to be able to set it in the manifest. Now you have to do it in your code, and I'll show you how to do that. The last thing I want to bring up in the manifest file is if you are migrating from a phone app, you'll have a phone identity section in your old app. And you'll want to make sure the UWP app has the exact same phone identity in it. That way, your app will be upgraded instead of handled as a different app. And it looks kind of like this. OK. A couple more changes to be made aware of. The window sizes. This was where I was talking about the min window size. This is how you, there's actually two things you can do with this. The application view class now has these new properties. Preferred launch windowing mode. There's auto, which means let Windows figure out the size for me. There's the preferred launch view size. And this is where you specify the launch view size that you want your app to be. And you can set that with the next API. Or you can say, hey, launch my app in full screen mode. And then lastly, here's the set preferred min size. The default as I mentioned, is 500 by 320. The largest min size your app could be, I think that's for our smallest tablets, is 500 by 500. And this is how you would use it in code. Again, you get the current view, set preferred min size. In this case, I'm showing you how to set the width to 320. OK, handling the back button. I showed you this in code briefly, but again, we have one. I talked about the Chrome back button coming. I'm going to show you the API for that. Again, it's not available in the current build of Windows, but I don't think it's too far off. Weeks away, I hope. And then there's a single converged back button API. And this is what the code looks like. There's a app view back button visibility, set it to visible or collapse. Now, the one thing you do want to do is, generally the UI guidance here is, don't show the back button if you can't go back anymore. So generally the pattern is, hey, can I go back, frame.can go back. If you can go back, show the back button in my Chrome. Otherwise, don't show it. And then the general back requested event handler will handle phone back button, app bar app button, or if you're in tablet mode, the back button at the bottom of the screen. Scale factors. So this has changed a little bit from Windows 8.1. These are the new scale factors here. This now it has a lot better alignment with other platforms. So if you're bringing your assets over from one of the other platforms, there's a greater chance of reuse for you guys. What we recommend you minimally do is support 100, 200, and 400. We'll scale down the large numbers to the middle. So if you provide the 400, we'll scale that down to 300 and 250. But if you want pixel perfection in your app, do them all. And it's pretty simple. We use technology called MRT, Modern Resource Technology. All you have to do is name your file with .scale dash and 200, for example, .png, for example. And that will load that one at runtime. There's a great talk that was pre-recorded for Bill to be available, 263, on display scaling. Goes into great detail on this, and he talks about effective pixels and how we've taken into account viewing distance and all the factors that go into effective pixels. The one thing I want to call out is some gotchas you might hit when you upgrade your apps. Some internal folks actually ran into this. And at first, was like, what was going on? We basically, as they upgraded their apps, look at the picture at the bottom. See the top line, Bookstore 1. Suddenly, it looked as big as what you're seeing on the right. What was happening was two things. One of the old scale factors was 140%. And the new one's 150. So we're bumping that up slightly if you're on a monitor that was 140. Same with 180. That's getting bumped up slightly. The second text in the picture below shows those. Unfortunately, I don't have them side by side, but the one on the right, they're both set to font size equals 15, but the one on the right is a little bit larger. Then because of our visual refresh, some of our styles changed. So you can see here, the title text block style was about 14 pixels, and the font size now is 24. So you can see how that one jumped. So that might catch you. Like suddenly your titles are just massive in your app, so you might want to change those. OK, so taking your app forward. Of course, at this point, you want to go on and make your app fluid, responsive. I showed you how to load tailored views. There's resizable desktops now on all these different Windows 10 devices your app will run on. Then, of course, there's adding new features. Lots of talks here this week on these new features. Cortana, all join. In XAML, we've added calendar view, split view, so you could do the menu hamburger pattern if you want, or use it in other ways. Again, there's some great talks on some of the new XAML features. And then performance. I mentioned that earlier. Good talk yesterday. Compiled bindings. There was another talk a few days ago on compiled bindings. I'd recommend checking that one out. That's one you have to opt into. You have to change your bind to xbind, and that'll compile them at runtime and add a good amount of performance. That talk's by Sam Spencer. And then lastly, I list a couple more performance improvements you can opt into. So Silverlight phone apps. I'm curious, how many of you have Silverlight phone apps out there? Awesome. OK, good amount of you guys, about half. So we have great content. We started with last year at Build. I'm moving your Silverlight app to 8.1 app on the Dev Center. The biggest challenge you're going to face is the API mapping. The namespaces have changed quite dramatically between Silverlight and the XAML framework. So that's generally the biggest challenge, is mapping everything over. I want to talk about some new porting tools coming as well at the end. I'm not going to deep dive into the Silverlight app. I just don't have time, unfortunately. And we talked a bunch at Build last year. And the content we have now on moving your app to a 8.1 app is still very relevant, as most of the APIs haven't changed between 8.1 and UWP. But we will be changing that content pretty soon as well to get you right from Windows 8.1 to a UWP app. But basically, we do have different runtimes. The Silverlight runtime and the XAML runtime are completely different runtimes. But most of your knowledge, if you know XAML, if you know .NET, C#, all that's going to transfer, of course, as well as much of your source code and UI markup. When bringing over your views, besides a lot of namespace changes that you have to make, they should be generally pretty straightforward to port over. Some of the controls have changed, however, like the web browser control is now called the web view control. There's a few controls you'll bump into. Other controls, like more basic ones, buttons, are generally the same, and that stuff will port over pretty easily. View models and data models, there's some namespace changes you might have to deal with your view models, but generally they should port over easily. Your data models, your .NET code essentially should port over quite easily. You'll generally have to change your resource, the way you handled resources in Silverlight to the MRT way in XAML files, but your resource files can be copied over pretty easily as well. You know, if you've got SDKs you're using, generally you're going to have to get new DLLs for them. The Silverlight ones don't generally work unless they're PCLs, but generally there's a lot of 8.1 SDKs available right now, and there's going to be a lot of UWP ones available over the coming months. Your assets, again, should be reusable. You might have to build the new scale factor ones you want as well. So again, a similar approach when porting your app over. I like to just add a new project to my solution and then copy my files over, add the references I need, modify a manifest file, and build, fix, build. When I originally had my feed reader app in Silverlight, and when I moved it over, it took me a week of evenings to get my app up and running. But I spent most of the time just redesigning the UX, getting it from that one column view to the 3-column view, making it look better. That's generally where you'll find you'll spend most of your time, which you essentially have to do anyways. That was my last point here. Is UX is most likely going to be phone designed if you have a Silverlight app. So we have partnered with Mobilize.net. They have a booth upstairs. It's in the back corner. Go talk to them. They have a tool coming out, and you can sign up to be on their beta. They're going to convert. There's over 1,200 mappings they've done. They have, we've provided them a list of the top used APIs, and they're starting out with 80%. They're going to keep working on it. It's going to be open source. Users can contribute to it. So check them out. And also, Rudy Hune sitting right here, one of our MVPs. He does great Windows Phone apps. He's got an awesome tool coming out as well called Univerlight. Flows really well. Try saying that. It's not ready yet, but he's working on it. It's going to be open source. And we're just real happy he's done that, too. Great job. So our call to action at this point is go port your apps. Let us know how it goes. Let us know if you run into any gotchas. Let us know how we can make the tooling better. We have a few more months to refine that. Go check out some of these other talks on taking your app forward. I now list a few of those other sessions to go check out. There's a great tooling one coming up by Uni. The other ones, I think most of them have already happened, but Uni has a great talk. I think it's coming up in half an hour. Again, we're kind of tight on time here, but I think I've got a few minutes. So if anyone wants to ask questions, come to the mics. And other than that, I'm going to go up to the Windows Insider Lounge for about 90 minutes or so. And I've listed a few resources here to go check out. One on upgrading your apps. We have a bit of documentation on there. We're going to keep adding more. And another one on designing your apps that will help you with the design. So thank you guys so much for coming, spending your time here. I hope you can go away with some ideas for coming up with a strategy for your apps. So thanks a lot, guys.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have any plans for conditionals inside the XAML?
It's something we've talked about, not in this release, but it's definitely something I could see happening in the future. Yeah, we've had that asked a few times. Yeah.
Another question. How much longer do you think, or do you expect people to support Windows 8 or 8.1 apps?
That's a really good question. I've seen like phone, and when you're dealing with mobile operators, it takes a while. They need to approve all the upgrades and stuff. And generally when our OSs in the past have come out, I think we're really trying to speed that up. But I think we said last year, I'm trying to remember last year with 8.0 apps, we kind of said like it might take a year. But I know Microsoft, we're really set on getting everyone upgraded to 10.0. So I think it should happen pretty quick, But users sometimes are just slow at upgrading their own devices. So my rough feel is at least a year. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else? Yeah.
What are the odds of the script that you guys will develop having some sort of an option that will convert the text styles and other such stuff like that? Because you mentioned that there are kind of one-to-one equivalents.
Yeah.
Why not have the script take care of that?
Yeah,
for
and
us?
we've looked at that, and basically we'd have to go back and really examine. Like the problem is the old styles aren't part of the new type ramp. And so we don't want people really using those old ones, and there's like new replacements. So what we're thinking of having is maybe a mapping table of what the new one is to the old one. So yeah, actually it wouldn't be too hard once we get that table to actually convert it for you in the upgrade. If that's, yeah. And if that's I'll take that feedback back actually, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. One over there?
Yeah, I actually had a question regarding the audio engine. Like, how did that change much between?
Sorry, the which engine?
Audio.
Audio?
Background audio. Yeah.
Oh, audio?
Audio.
Oh, audio. I'm not part of that team, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But I don't think it's changed a lot. There's been a lot of convergence, however, between like the way background audio is handled between phone and desktop. They had to come up with a converged model. I believe there is an audio talk, though. I'd have to go look it up in the session. So they would have a lot more information on that. Yeah.
Thanks.
You bet.
Hi. I have two questions.
Sure.
First is, what would you say if people don't want convergence, like they really want to target phone only?
Yeah, that's interesting, and there's absolutely valid scenarios for that. And again, right now you could start with the mobile, because right now in the store, the only way to limit it would be to pick one of those device families. So there's no way to say phones right now. But there's other ways at runtime to detect capabilities. So it depends what you mean by a phone. Like, what's a 6-inch tablet versus a 6-inch phablet? Like, which one is a phone? Is it the cell stack that you care about? Is it GPS that you care about? So there are capabilities that you can build in as well. And the store supports saying, hey, I require this capability. I don't know if the cell stack is one of those. I'd have to check with the store team, but it might be, or it's something they possibly could add in the future. But essentially, I would start with do the mobile. And I believe the store as well will have a way to limit your app and say only deploy to mobile devices. So if you did have a UWP app and you wanted to deploy it to mobile only because it's only been designed for mobile, even though it would happily run on all the other devices, I believe there will be a way in the store to basically set that up. And then later, when you determine, hey, it actually runs fine on these other devices, maybe I'll open up the floodgates. You can do that without a code change or without resubmitting your app. When you put it in the manifest file, it locks it in, though. It'll only work on devices that support that API set.
Okay. The other thing is I heard VoIP agents won't make it for RTM. Do you have any comment on that?
Again, I don't. That's our app model team that owns that.
Okay.
And I think there was a talk that covered some of that stuff, so I don't know the latest on that. Yeah. That's news to me, actually, too. So yeah, I don't keep tabs on that one, unfortunately, as much. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, well, thanks again, guys. Appreciate your time.